Is it possible to get Jimmy Page's boosted tone in a single pedal? Well, today we're going to find out. I'm building an Echoplex preamp pedal on Tagboard. Follow this step-by-step guide and you'll be able to build your very own Echoplex EP Booster pedal. I'll be using my 15 years experience building guitar effects pedals at sea in the Royal Navy to build the best possible pedal I can using vintage and Mojo components. Stay around to the end and we'll hear how you can use this pedal to boost your amplifier just like Jimmy did. This is going to be a super interesting build today. I absolutely love the EP Booster and I have built one of these, or maybe two of these in the past. I think it was one of the first circuits I built on Tagboard. So it's going to be interesting to revisit it all these years later now that I've acquired a few extra skills. And for this episode, we're going to go with this enclosure. If anyone wants one of these sloped enclosures, any of you builders out there, let me know in the comments and I'll point you in a direction to the place where I get them from. Now, this one has been refinished, or finished should I say, in kimono fabric. In 2021 when I was on deployment, we were out in the South China Sea for a long time. And one of the ports we called into while we were away was Japan. We went to a place called Sasebo. Don't know if that's how you say it, but that's how it's spelt. And it was a lovely place and the people there are absolutely wonderful. I can't wait to go back to Japan. That was right in the middle of COVID, so we were quite restricted. But anyway, while I was there, I bought myself a kimono. As a bit of a joke with all the lads on board, we tried to see who could get the worst kimono. And I, of course, went for the effeminate option and got this pink fabric one. And let's be honest, it makes much better pedals than it does a kimono. So I bought this out in 2021. I love how it looks and it's going to be fun to see how this pedal turns out. As you can see over here, we've got our capacitors, our resistors, and all of our hardware and extra bits like the transistors and stuff ready to go. I haven't put them out on a piece of paper like I normally do. I haven't had a chance to print one off and everyone at home is in bed, so I don't want to be flashing up the printer and waking my wife up because she'll go nuts. She'll probably go nuts because I'm awake in the middle of the night trying to make a video. Anyway, so where does the Jimmy Page connection come from with this pedal? Well, he used to run the Echoplex in front of his amplifier without the delay on, just to use the preamp, which was a valve preamp, let's face it, just to use that preamp into the front of his amplifiers. The pedal I'm building today was designed by a company called Exotic. We've all heard of Exotic, they're a fantastic company. Well, I'm building a version on Tagboard. Theirs comes in a really small format. It looks amazing, it sounds amazing. I would definitely buy one. In fact, I own 3. But I thought, why not build this with a little bit of Hello Sailor effect style and of course using silly size components on Tagboard. First things first, we're going to go onto our Tagboard. We have of course got the last of these little Tagboards from Hubcap John. Stupidly, when I was cutting it to length, because you need 10 tags, I cut right the way through the end of it, so this tag's a little bit loose swinging in the wind. So I really want to get the component through there so then it holds it in place. I'm probably going to solder that one on first, even though I hate starting from this end, but just to safeguard that from popping out and me not being able to get it back in, I'm going to go that way round first. First up on the block is this 100 UF cap. It is a vintage Rubicon. They're quite well renowned caps, or well respected. This is an old one. I say vintage, but you know, it's pretty old. It's 63 volts and it, you know, it's not an axial, but then again, it fits in between the tags on this quite nicely. And this is going to go into the tag that I snapped. And normally I wouldn't put this on first. So if I get the diagram up, you can see on the right hand side there, we've got C3 and this is C3. Our negative is going to be pointing upwards, which is to this tag here, and our positive down to this tag here. I'm going to go ahead and put that on there. I've pre-cleaned the legs, but we might as well give them another clean, why not? Now, with this Tagboard, because there's only one tag either side, as opposed to my normal Tagboard, that each end of the board has 2 tags in each hole, I'm kind of struggling, because after the fact, I'm going to have to put wires onto the board. For me, I'm just going to wrap the right wire around the post afterwards and solder it on. Just seems like an easier way to do it. wonder if Mr. Page would approve of the DIY nature of my pedal building. And I also wonder if he still uses the EP Booster, the Echoplex itself, the preamp in that, as a boost into his amplifiers when he's playing live, or if he's found some sort of modern recreation. If anyone knows, please let me know. And now we're going to do it on normal way from left to right, just because my brain works better that way. And the first cap we're going to use is this 4.7 UF orange drop. This one's actually from an old toolbox that I had in my mum's garage. She phoned me up and said, "Oh, I've got this old toolbox. It's full of your stuff. There might be something good in here." And it was basically full of crap. But it did have this in it, where I've obviously extended the legs in the past and then heat shrunk it for some reason. That I can't remember what I was doing with this thing. But it also had in it an NKT275. I don't think it tested in spec if I remember rightly, but I was shocked to find that in there. Now this cap is going to go straight up and down in lugs 1 on both sides. I'm only going to solder in the top half, because in the bottom half we've got R14 to go in that gap as well. So because we've only got the one hole either end, I'm going to have to solder it in now. So just going to solder this top lug here. So I realise this cap's a little bit big for the board, but it is literally the only 4.7 4.7 UF cap that I've got, so didn't really have a choice. Now moving on to R14. R14 is actually 33k, and I didn't have that either. Not doing very well here, am I? So what I have got is a 39k resistor and a 22k resistor. If we put these in parallel, I nearly said series then, that would have been disastrous. If we put these in parallel, that will make 33k. And because these are really old resistors, I'm going to have to clean the legs because they have an abnormal amount of build up on them. They'd love to know in the comments if anyone's thinking about building this pedal and having a crack at it, especially if you're going to build it in relation to it being a preamp for the delay. At the end of the video, we're going to hear it with at least one, maybe two different delay pedals. And again, for these, when I'm joining them together, I like to make a V out of the legs and then give them a twist. And then I'll just solder that and we'll have a nice connection. And then same on this side. Give them a twist. I usually just pick, because I mean you can pick either leg to be the leg that you're going to use. I usually just pick whichever one's the straightest. And if we solder them in, one problem you will find if you're using these old resistors, when you go to solder it, the solder just doesn't want to adhere to them. And that is when you know that you haven't cleaned it properly, definitely. And then we can just straighten that up with these. Now this one is going to go into the same tag that we started with, and then it's going to miss 3 tags along. So 1, 2, 3, and it's going to go into this tag here. So if I just position that where I want it to go, and what I'm going to do is, sounds vain, out of these two resistors, I like the look of that bottom one the best. It's an Iskra resistor. It's an old one. I like the look of it, so I'm going to make sure that that goes on the top, so when people looking at the pedal, that's what they see. There we are. Our resistor is now fitted. I've soldered this piece in because there's no other components going into this slot. And this is run down to here. Now it'll be this way round as you're looking at it, if you're looking at the drawing. I have opened up the tag on this one here because we've got another 1, 2, 3, at least another 4 components going in there, so that should be fun. Next up, in the next tag along, is going to be R13. and I can see that R13 is 100 ohms. Can you believe we've hit 2,400 subscribers and over 2,750,000 views? It's mental. Thank you so much to everyone who's followed this channel and helped me build this great community. I'd like to say a special thank you to everyone who's built pedals from my videos. It's absolutely crazy for me to think that you guys are building stuff from these videos. It's mad. If you'd like to support the show further, please follow the link down below to the HelloSailorEffects.com website and check out my other custom builds. Next up is going to be R13. That's a 100 ohm resistor, and that is going from tag 2 on the upper and tag 2 on the lower. As you see on our drawing, we can see that C8 also attaches into the upper tag, so we're only going to be soldering in the bottom one. Right, now the reason that we didn't solder the top one is because we have C8 going in the top one, and C8 is shown as a 10 UF. For 10 UFs, I'm going to be using these Philips electrolytics. I know that they're not axial, so technically on a tagboard they look a bit funny, but they're small, and the tags are really small here. There's not much space, so I'm going to use them. And do you know what? Philips is a great brand, so it has that in its favour. The negative side of this, and I think I might have just cut that too short. Brilliant. Let me see. No, I haven't. So the negative side of this, which is marked with the black line, is going to be facing upwards again. So the negative side goes in with R13, and then the positive side goes down and attaches into that opposite lug there. I can't solder the bottom lug because we've got another component going in there, but I can solder the top lug because there's nothing else going in there. Going into the same lug as the positive for C8 is going to be R11, which is a 10k resistor. I'm using this modern resistor just because I've got them in stock. And if anyone watched or listened to the podcast that we did with Marcus Reeves of Reeves Electro, he went into detail on why he uses these and the materials they're made up of. And some of the smaller value ones actually cheap out. So there's a reason for going larger when it comes to these modern resistors, because they use cheaper materials on the smaller ones. I think he said that the legs weren't copper on the smaller ones, which is interesting. Next up is going to be C5 and C9. C5 goes from this pin here, which is tag 3 on the top row, to tag 4 on the top row. Now I'm using this non-polar electrolytic, so I can put this in any way round because it's not polar. However, if you're using a normal electrolytic cap, don't forget that they are polar, and the negative side has to go to pin 4. Also coming out of this tag is C9. Now C9 is a 3300 PF cap or a 3.3 NF cap, same value, different denomination. I don't have any of them, but what I do have is a 2200 PF cap, Mullard mustard cap. I love them. And then this rather small 1 NF cap. If I add them together in parallel, I'm going to get 3.3 NF. Actually, to be exact, I'm going to get 3.2 NF. But that's close enough for government work. Or as someone said in my last video, close enough to rock. First of all, let's get these joined together. Now, you may be tempted to use the legs on this capacitor over the legs on this one because they're bigger. That's no good on this tagboard because the tagboard's small. But also, the way that I've reclaimed this from an old radio hasn't left much of a leg on this side. And it seems pretty pointless trying to salvage these legs. So what I'm going to do is, once I've cleaned the legs off, and I am using the Stanley blade because I don't want to pull on them with my snips just in case they're a bit fragile. I mean, you should be okay. It tests fine. I have tested it, and in fact, once we've soldered this together, we will test it. Clean his legs off. I had a massive debate on my last video on whether stacking capacitors together is any good or not, and do you know, there's pros and cons of all of it, and if you're using two different types of capacitors, there's actually a thought that you get the benefits of both, and you can get less ESR, less inline resistance. ESR, what is it? I forget what it stands for. It's basically resistance in the capacitor. So it can be a good thing, but then someone was saying just buy the right value in the first place, which is a fair comment. So if we solder them on, this is where having them little handy arms comes in, you know, that hold your components in place while you solder would be useful, but of course I haven't got them. To test this cap, I'm going to be using my Fluke 101. If you want one of these flukes, you can actually get one from the Amazon affiliates link in the description below. I'll get a small kickback. It helps fund the show with no extra cost to yourself. And of course, with that money, I'll buy more kits, components and tools to use while I'm filming this stuff for you guys. Who am I kidding? They're filming it for me because I like doing it. It's just a bonus if you like it too. If we move our dial round to this symbol here, which is a capacitor symbol, we can put our leads across it and see that we're actually getting 3.42 NF, which isn't too bad. It's in a ballpark for what I was going for. I'm quite happy with it considering I thought it was going to be 3.2. So let's just double check again. That said 3.4, yeah, 3.4. I'm going to go ahead and get these two caps fitted. Already this board's getting a little bit congested. I've got the 10 UF cap at the back here, C5. I haven't soldered this side in because we've got some other stuff to go in there. And then we have C9 coming across here and dropping into the fourth tag along on the bottom row. Again, I haven't soldered that in because we have got to fit some other stuff. I've also noticed that there's two resistors, R12 going from here to here and R8 going from here to here that are still yet to go on. I think I'm going to solder them in after the fact, and I'll just wrap the legs around the posts to get them in because there's literally no space here. Now next it starts to get a little bit complicated because we've got R10 coming from the end of this mustard cap, we're going straight up and it meets R10 UF cap, and then coming from the 10 UF cap we still can't solder in because we've got some more caps coming, some more stuff going on from there, but we will be able to solder in R10 at this end. Now R10's a 1 meg resistor. I've got some rather large 1 meg resistors that are, in fact, here they are. They're from the same brand as our 10k resistor. I'm going to go ahead and situate that in there now, and I'll solder this end in. There's R10, our 1 meg resistor, now in place. Next up is going to be R9, and that's going to go from the 4th tag along on the top to the 5th tag along on the bottom. I'm not going to solder this one on the bottom because there's 2 other components to go in there, still 3 other components, tell a lie. That should be fun. There's our 10k resistor now in place. I've only soldered this end here because up this end we've got a few more components to go into this tag. The first of which is D2. Now if we get our drawing up, you can see that D2 goes from this tag here straight across to this tag here. Now D2 is drawn as a black diode with a white band around it. In my experience, usually that means a power diode, something like a 1N4001, something along them lines. However, if we look to the right hand side, we can see on our drawing it's labelled up as a 1N4118. Now confusingly enough, a 1N4118 is a Zener diode of some kind. I've never heard of it, never seen one before. It's a bit suspicious, and with the black drawing of D2 it confused me a little bit. However, 1N4118 is remarkably close to 1N4148, and I just wonder if Audio Clone, who drew this layout, maybe mixed up a few numbers on labelling the diode and just chose to use a black body on there because it looked good against the green background. I don't know. So if we have a look for another layout just to see what it says, and we can see over here that it's labelled up as a 4148, which is these Probably the most common diodes that you come across in the DIY world. Now, when situating this, the white band on our drawing for D2 corresponds with the black band on this here. That is the cathode of the diode. I've discussed this before in the past, so I won't bore you to tears with it. And that's just going to situate this way round with the black band pointing towards our 10k resistor. I'm going to fit that now. I will solder in this end up here because there is no other connections going in there. Now that D2 is in place, we can move on to R2, which also comes from this tag here and goes across to this tag here. Now R2 is labelled up as an 8.2k resistor, and that's because it's going to be biasing Q1, which is our J201 JFET. However, as people will know in the past, I find it hard to get the J201s that aren't fake. You get a lot of them made in China. They're not real J201s, as it were. They come mislabeled and stuff, and they're really erratic, so I don't use them. I am instead going to be using a J113, which is the same FET that I use in the Kossoff drive. However, that biases differently. So R2 being 8.2k will not work for the J113. Or maybe it will work, I don't know. Either way, I'm not taking a risk. What I am going to do is omit that resistor, and I'm going to add in this. It's a rather cool old potentiometer from Spectral. This is a 20k potentiometer, and I'm going to join the wiper and one of the legs together, and that will be one connection of my resistor and go to a tag. And then the other leg, the other end will go to the other tag, and we'll have basically a variable resistor, which is all that trim pots are. And that way I can bias the JFET by ear and get it exactly dialed in. And that's the way that I do my Kossoff drive and any FETs really. I'm going to go ahead and fit that now. Okay, so I went a bit off-piste with this one. What I have done is I've attached both legs of our potentiometer to this tag here. So the wiper got attached directly to the tag, and then the other leg got attached to the diode, which are both connected to this tag. So that is connected together. And then the other side of the potentiometer, I've just simply attached a bit of wire to, and then run the wire around and into the tag where it needs to go. The reason being for that is if I had to run a bit of component leg or something, that would have been in the way, because I've got to run our next component, which is C4, has to sit in this space here. So now I've left space for C4 to sit. C4 is a 47 UF cap. So I'm going to go ahead and snip the legs down of that. I'm going to add this in now with the negative side going down towards here. So the negative side's going in this tag here, the positive side's going in this tag. We will be soldering the positive side, but we won't be soldering the negative side because of course we've got another couple of components to go in there. That's C4 now situated in. I've left this end unsoldered because we've got a couple of components to go in there. However, before we get to that, I appear to have missed off C7. In fact, you know what? I've completely messed this up. I've got confused. C7 is a 47 UF cap, so that cap I've just soldered in there needs to come out. That's actually C7. And C4, as I'm sure everyone's been screaming at the screen to tell me, is this. It is, of course, a 10 UF cap. So first things first, I'm going to desolder C7. As so. Get that out the way. And then I will add that in. This is going to go from the back of R10, which is here. And it comes across all the way to here. So I'm going to have to add in a few extra lengths to be able to make that distance. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Mistake rectified. We have C4, which is our 10 UF cap. with its negative leg pointing towards the bottom, situated here. And then I've also added in C7, which is a 47 UF cap, or microfarad if you're being pedantic. I know it's correct. There you go. There's always someone who has to point that out that I'm wrong there. Anyway, I've pointed it out for you. So that goes from the one lug that we had our D2 go into and several other components. It goes to that lug, funnily enough, which is a bit of a pain in the backside if you're using a tagboard the size of a flea like I am. And then that attaches to this tag here at the back, but I've left it just hanging there because we've got a few other components to go in there. Now, if we get up our drawing, you can see that C4 in the center has its negative end going to this tag here, and attached to that tag is also R6. Now, R6 is a 1K resistor. I've got this 1K resistor here, and that's going to go just between them two. Now, it can be soldered in to this other side because there's nothing else going into this tag. In fact, that's a lie. There is R7 needs to go in this tag as well, but I'm actually going to mount that under the board just because there's too much going on the top for my brain to handle at the minute. So we're going to solder in R6 now, and it can go in both sides. I can solder it straight away because there's no other components going in there. There's R6 fitted between these two tags here, and I also went ahead and fitted R7, which is a 15K that comes from the bottom of our 3300 PF cap, the one that we had to make up out of two. Comes from the bottom of that, misses two tags, and then goes into the bottom of this 1K resistor, which is R6. I thought I'd fit this now while I'm still thinking about it. It's a shame you don't see it, but at least it keeps it out the way. Next up, if we look on our diagram, is going to be from this pin here to this pin here, we've got R1, and then this is going to get quite congested down here because we've also got R5 and R3 going in there. R1 is a 4.7K resistor, so that'll go across here. I will be able to in fact I won't be able to solder the top of this in because we've got a cap going in there too, which is C2. First, I'm going to go ahead and situate R1 in place, and then we'll probably run C2 from the top side of R1 round to this pin here on C3, and that'll just get that side of the tag done, and we can solder it in, ready for the fun and games this side. There's R1 in place, which is our 4.7K resistor. I went with this high precision resistor. They are hideously expensive, but I got a load of them for not all that much money, so I do like to use them. And then I also added in C2, which is a 10 UF cap, and that's going to this pin here and back to the other side of R1. If we get our diagram up, we can see that our next resistors are going to be R3, which goes straight up and down from the next lug along from the bottom of R1. R3 is a 1 meg resistor. Now both sides of this have got other things going on. So this end we're going to attach R5, as you can see at the bottom here, which is a 1 meg resistor too. And at the top we've got R4, which is a 33K. Now there's going to be much more involved with R4 because we're going to have to mix and match like we did down here. So I'm going to go ahead and situate R3 in place, which is 1 meg, and then also R5 in place, which is 1 meg, and then we can get this joint here soldered in so this cap isn't floating in the wind. There's our two 1 meg resistors in place. We've got R3 here and R5 here. Now I haven't soldered this side of R5 because we have got another capacitor to go in here, but before we get to that, going between the top of R3 and the next tag along is R4. Now R4 is a 33K resistor, so again we have our 39K resistor and our 22K resistor. Now I am going to clean the legs on these because they're old. Basically, I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did right here, and I'm going to add these resistors in here. Now that we have our 33k resistor made up, I'm just going to check it with my flute to make sure that it's actually the right value, because we are dealing with vintage components after all. Now, I see a problem. I may have got some values wrong here. Okay, so I'm getting 13k. Clearly my maths is off. So there's only one thing for it. Okay, so clearly my maths was off when I was trying to figure out resistor values. So the only thing for it is to, of course, ask ChatGPT. And I've typed in, if I have a 39k resistor, what other resistor can I add to get 33k? 39k is the closest resistor that I've got to it, so there you go. It's doing all the maths for me. I mean, who wants to do all that, eh? And it's saying adding a 214k resistor, or nearest value, standard values of 220k, should get us 33k from it. So I'm going to go ahead and have a look for the 220k resistor. Okay, so here's my 39k resistor, and I have got these wonderful Allen Bradley 220k resistors. These are getting rather expensive now. These are vintage. Does it have a date on them? Nope. Well, there is date codes, but I can't be bothered figuring it out. So 33k and a 220k in parallel. Do we think they make the right value? Well, ChatGPT tells us that it does, and it's usually not too bad. So I'm definitely going to have to clean the crud off the legs on these. Look at all that. It's oddly satisfying to watch them shine up. So if I take my 33k, we've got the Allen Bradley 220, and I'm just going to splice them together real quick. Right, now let's see if we get 33k. So round to ohms. Test either sides. What we got? 33.7k. Oh, you can't quite see it there. 33.7k. Close enough for government work, or close enough to rock, as they say. Right, I'm going to go ahead and make two of these up. I'm going to replace this resistor here with one of these, and then I'm also going to add in R4 at this end. I can't solder this tag in because we still have C1 to go, but I will be able to solder this tag. There's our resistors now in place. We've replaced this one here that I completely messed up and got the wrong value, and then also we've added in this one here just between these two pins here. Now we still need to add in C1, which goes from our 15k resistor, our 1 meg resistor R5 from here, and then it goes straight up and across to the other side of R4, and we can solder both sides of that in. It should be our last onboard component on the top side. We just need to go back and double check and put in R12 and R8 on the underside, but let's worry about that in a second. C1 is a 47 NF cap. So on our drawing, if I get our drawing up, you can see that it's labelled up as a 0.047 microfarad, which is 47 NF. And I've got this ITT cap. These are really good. You see them in a lot of high-end fuzz pedals, like from Seeker Electric, Mike over at Seeker, who we're having on the podcast soon as well. Get in, I can't wait. He's like Mr. Fuzz himself. So I tell you what, he does some amazing kits as well. If you want a Seeker Electric pedal, but you haven't got the money to pay for one that Mike's built, or you just want to have a crack yourself, that'd be amazing. Maybe I should buy one of them and do it for a video. Wonder how we feel about that. Anyway, I'm thinking out loud. Let's get our 47 NF cap in. There's C1 now in place, and we're all good to go on the top side of the board. How congested is that? So I've squeezed 10 tags worth of of components onto this tiny board, and I haven't scrimped on all the sizes. Next, we're going to add in R12 and R8. Now R12 is a 47k resistor. Now these were unlabeled up in my drawer, but I'm pretty sure that they are 47k, so I'll just test that and find out. I've got so many components in drawers and stuff that it's hard to keep track of them sometimes, and I don't know the colour code, so it could be 400. There you go, that settles that one. Couldn't get my words out. 47k. And then we have our 10k as well. So R12 is the 47k, and that goes from the top row, second pin along, which if we just double check, it connects to C8 and R13, which it does. And then we're going to go into the next pin, so the third pin. So it is literally going to go, if I can get this right, from there to there. So this is how I'm going to do it. I make two little hooks, slot them in the bottom. Now I can see that there's a ground wire coming from one of them, but we can just loop that round the leg of the resistor. That's not a problem. So I'm going to solder in this leg first. Now the reason I haven't soldered in the other leg is because we still have R8, is it? Yeah, no, R9. No, R8. Yeah, I was right. We still have R8 to come from that one. And R8 is going to do the same, and it's going into the next pin along. Now I don't think... Oh yeah, I will. I was going to say I don't think I'll be able to squeeze it in there, but I can. Don't like adding components to the bottom of the board. For anything else, it defeats the object of having Tagboard for easy maintenance. But you know, this board's just ridiculous size to try and fit all this on, so there is no choice. Now, there is only one jumper wire that I can see, and that goes from the first lug on the first tag on the top side, and then it goes into, oddly enough, the same tag that both of these go into. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a wire from here round and to here. Just a standard insulated wire, nothing fancy, and it keeps it under the board and out the way. Next, we need to add in our transistors. Q1 is a JFET. It is meant to be a J201, but like stated, we're going to use a J113. This is a J113. It has the same pin out as a J201, so I don't need to twist any of the pins around or orientate it in a different manner. All I have to do is attach it the same as our diagram. So it goes in where R4 and R3 meet, which is here. It goes in there, there and there. That makes sense. So I'm just going to attach it in. I'll slide these legs through and then solder it on right in that position there, and then snip the excess off, and that'll be it for this one. Well, that wasn't the easiest to get in, I've got to say. I've had to solder one leg to the end of our resistor, and then the other two did actually make it to the tags, but it's not the prettiest thing in the world. However, we are squeezing an awful lot into such a small space to get it in this small enclosure. Now onto our Q2, which is a 2N5088. I don't have any of them, but what I do have is this. It is a BC549C. Now these are meant to be super quiet, and it's also what goes in the Cornish G2 that we've just built. So that's fun. The question is, what's the pin out of this and the pin out of a 2N5088? Now the question is this the same pin out as our 2N5088? So let's search that and find a picture. Here's a picture of our 2N5088, and we can see that the flat side facing towards us gives us the emitter on the left hand side, the base in the center, and the collector on the right hand side. And that's exactly how it needs to go in our circuit. with the flat side facing towards us if we were using that transistor. However, we're not. So let's test our transistor. These are actually meant to be really quiet, which is, I'm guessing why they used it in a, oh, it's saying a Darlington transistor there. Didn't know it was 2 transistors stacked together, but there you go. So what we got here, we've got the red is the emitter, blue is the base, and green is the collector. So red is the emitter, whereas on our 2N5088 we can see that the emitter is on the left hand side, whereas for us the emitter is on the right hand side. The green is the collector for us, which is on the left hand side, and on our 2N5088, why can't I not say that, on our transistor that's meant for this, we can see that the collector is on the right hand side with the flat facing towards us. So all we need to do to make this work is simply flip the transistor around and have the flat side facing towards the pedal. The key when you're doing anything like this is to look at where the base is. If the base is on one of the ends, i.e. not the centre leg, that's when you start having to cross legs over and mess about. Usually people try and avoid that on the layouts so you don't have to go through it, but there you go. I'm going to go ahead and get this installed. There it is in place. I've managed to slot it in. Again, not very pretty, but that's because there's so much going on with this pedal. Now I think that should be all of our capacitors and components in place now with any luck. I'm going to go ahead and add in all of the wires that are going to go out the bottom. Wherever there's a wire on our drawing, I'm going to just cut a large length of wire out, strip the end and tin it, poke it through the hole in the bottom to the corresponding tag, solder it, and then we'll have a beautiful snake's wedding of wires coming out of this absolute monstrosity. There we go, all wired up, snake's wedding ready to go inside the pedal. Next thing is going to be to add the hardware to the enclosure. So what have we got hardware wise? We've got our usual gold pin 3-pole double throw stomp switch, of course. We've got 2 on double pole double throw switches. Really you need a single pole double throw switch, which means that there's only a bank of 3 instead of 2 banks of 3, because remember the center pin is our common, and that either connects to this side or it connects to this side. Well, really I only need 1/2 of these for each switch, but I haven't got just the single pole double throw, single pole single throw. I am using these double pole double throw switches in their place. I went with red for our 9-volt jack barrel, whatever you want to call it, DC jack, just because I think it'll look nice with this. Now onto the fun bit. The volume pot needs to be a 10kC, which means that it's an anti-log. So how to explain that? Well, I tell you what, we'll populate the enclosure and then we'll talk about this potentiometer. This is a really old CTS pot, metal shaft CTS pot from back in the day. I think it's like 60s. In fact, can I get a, I wonder if there's a number on it. No, I can't see a serial number. Sorry, a date number and anything. But as you can see, it is old. Now we're on to the potentiometer. As stated before, this is a CTS pot. It's got a real nice CTS stamp on the bottom of it there, or on the back of it, and it's stamped CTS. It's a 25k log pot, so it's an audio taper pot. But what we want is a 10k C anti-log taper pot. Okay, so how do we do that? We really need an anti-log, and the only way for me to get it, because I could have ordered an anti-log potentiometer, a 10kC. Of course I could have, that would have meant waiting, but that also means that I'm using a newer pot. And you know, some people disagree, but I certainly know that R2R Electric and a few other, Chris Vincent, a few other people will agree that potentiometers are really the secret to tone. They make the extra like percent, if you like, in my mind. Someone please in the comments prove me wrong, but for me the potentiometers are where the magic happens. So I want to use this old potentiometer. So what am I going to do? Well, if we add in a resistor between this lug here and this lug here, now what resistor value can we put in there to make this pot come down to a 10k pot? Well, it's 16.7k to be exact, but I'm going to use 16.5k. So how am I going to get 16.5k? I'm glad you asked. Well, I have this Carbon Comp 15k. Of course it's an old one, it's vintage. And then I have this high precision I think it's 1.47k resistor, and I'm going to run them in series, so one after another, and that'll give me 16.5k, and that is pretty damn close. So when I put these in, I'm going to put one resistor to the center lug, the other resistor to the lug on this side, the end, the left side, and then I'll join them together, and then I'll wire the pot up as normal, and we'll have our anti-log 10kc potentiometer, only using a vintage CTS pot. I know I'm going to get hammered in the comments for doing this instead of buying a pot. I don't care. Please tell me how terrible I am and how much I'm ruining the world by reusing all this old gear. I love it. Anyway, let's get it done. There we have our potentiometer now finished. We've got a 16.5k resistor essentially between this pin and this pin, which then drops the value of the carbon trace between this pin and this pin. Remember, the carbon trace goes round here, and so when we're moving the pot, the wiper will go round and it'll be less resistance in this half, which means that it's going to be anti-log, and then there'll be more resistance in this half, which will well, that's just what it is. I'm going to go ahead and fit that into the enclosure, and now our enclosure is populated with all of its hardware, and we've got our board in. I was originally going to run the Tagboard this way, however there just weren't enough room with all the components I've got hanging off the edge, and I only just about squeezed it here and really hoping that the side of the enclosure doesn't foul this transistor, so I may have to adjust that. I did have to adjust the height of this 10UF cap. I had it sitting right up here, it would have fouled the enclosure, and these enclosures are pretty deep, so I did well there to hit that, so happy with that. First thing to do inside here is to just populate all of these wires coming off the board to wherever they need to go. That'll get this mess out the way, so then we can try and make sense of the rest of it. Now, I have noticed another issue, well, not really an issue, but something that's going to annoy me, is our switches are shorter than the shaft on this potentiometer. Doesn't normally happen. The shaft's normally lower, the switches, it'll sit even then, but now when I try and lie this down, it tilts to one side, and that's just going to annoy the living daylights out of me. So I'm going to use this and just rest it like that, and that'll save my sanity. I think a bit higher, that'll save my sanity, and I can work on it there. That's all the wires coming from the board to the various locations around the place. We've got our switches wired up, we've got our 9V going into the DC jack, we've got an earth coming up here. Yeah, so now that they're all terminated, all that's left to do really is wire up our LED and then wire up our 3-pole double throw switch. If anyone wants to know how to do that, then I have a video called Build Your First Guitar Effects Pedal or something like that. I'll put a link in the description. Watch that and I show you exactly how I wire up the 3-pole double throw switch and the LED. That's all of our 3-pole double throw switch wired up, and I've went ahead and run some earth wires to join the jacks together, earth the pot and earth this connection here. Now while I was doing that, I noticed something pretty important. This transistor here, which is our, is that our FET? No, it's our BC549, so for you it would be the 2N5088. I've actually put it in the wrong position. If you see here, it's one away from this, so it's like one tag, then the transistor. It should be 2 tags, then the transistor, so I need to move it over one to the right. I can't believe it. What an idiot. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and clip this transistor out. I am simply going to just take my snips and snip the legs. I don't want to mess about like soldering and desoldering too much in here in case I burn something out, you know. And then I know it was facing towards the circuit, so I'll just move it over one and put it back in. Ha! What an idiot. Here's our transistor now situated in the right tags. It's time to move on to the last bit, which will be to get some cable ties in here and make it all nice and neat. The question is, if I messed up that, something as fundamental as which tags the transistor goes into, there's only 2 of them. I wonder what else I've messed up. Will this actually work? What do we think? Give me a shout in the comments and let me know if you think that this is going to work first time or whether it's going to be a flop. Now that we've got our cable ties in and everything's a little bit neater, I mean it's not neat by any stretch of the imagination, but a little bit neater, it's time to move on to the most important part. Which knobs would you choose? Now this is an interesting one because the shaft on this CTS pot is massive. It's like really long, so it sticks well off the body. I should really cut it down, but I don't want to start soldering it now it's in the pedal and it's there now, so I'm definitely not taking it out again. The question is, which knobs would you choose with that? Now, I really like the idea of having white up against the pink. I think it looks good. However, one thing to take into consideration is how far it sits off the back of the pedal. Probably not my favourite choice, but what do you think? I do like them cupcake knobs. I prefer brown. Then we've got the old Dumbley style. I mean, that looks good, but again, it's going to sit really high on the pedal. And these are the ones that people have said looks like the old Gibson amplifiers. Does sit high on the pedal, but it's not as noticeable, I don't think, with that one. Then we move on to the Neve style. First bakelite is the smaller maroon style. Then we go on to the larger maroon ones. These are probably my favourite, if I'm being honest. It doesn't impinge on the switches. It sits low to the pedal. And I think that colour goes well with the with the DC jack and stuff. And then, of course, the Klon style bakelite knob. It does sit off a little bit, but it's not as noticeable because it's a large knob. I think it looks alright. What do we think? What would you choose? And now it's the time everyone's been waiting for. It is, of course, the sound sample. You're going to hear this Echoplex EP Booster on its own with me using my TC Electronics wiretap. I'll be using it as an always-on boost pedal, like a preamp, exactly like the Echoplex preamp was designed for. And I'll also be cranking the signal right the way up so you can hear what it sounds like pushing the front end of my amplifier. After that, we're going to use it as a preamp for one of my Seawolf delay pedals. You can hear how it affects a delay pedal to have a good signal going in the front. I'd love to know what you guys think of this build and the sound sample afterwards. Please let me know in the comments. found this video interesting, you'll definitely find this video interesting, where I show you how to build one of my Abbey Road fuzz pedals.